And as we were reporting, the International Court of Justice held a hearing in the framework of South Africa's accusation against Israel of committing genocide in Gaza. Several governments and social movements from all around the world had been calling for support to South Africa's case in The Hague and hold Israel accountable for the genocide against the Palestinian people that so far have left over 23,000 dead. To know more about this important matter, we welcome Manolo de Los Santos, US-based researcher and political activist, co-director of the People's Forum movement. Hello, Manolo. Welcome to From the South.
Hello. It's a pleasure to join teleSUR again.
Thank you so much for joining us today. First, the United States is slamming South Africa's case and calling it meritless. To what extent is the U.S. responsible for the ongoing massacre in the Gaza Strip?
Well, I think that the U.S.'s response, particularly by Secretary of State Blinken, is precisely a ruse to actually hide the great complicity of the United States government in not just funding, but directly arming this genocide against the Palestinian people. We know for a fact that Israel's heavy bombing campaign could have only been possible under the current conditions due to the heavy and extensive shipment of weapons sent by the United States that at this point goes over 60,000 tons of armament and munitions sent in the last 90 days. We know also that the U.S. has been providing diplomatic and political cover for these crimes. So in a sense, it's not just Israel that is being tried or being held accountable in this court, but also the complicity of the United States, but also other governments in the global north and in Europe that continue to be silent in the world's demands for a ceasefire and who continue to allow Israel to kill and maim and destroy the lives of the Palestinian people without any recourse.
As you said, despite the widespread support that South Africa has received on the first day of the hearing, Israel continues to deny the genocide. Do you believe that the international community's efforts are in vain, or is there a turning point on the way?
I don't think any of the efforts are in vain. The fact that this unprecedented case is taking place, for the first time, Israel has been forced to be held accountable, to reckon with the truth of its crimes. The South African legal team expertly didn't just raise the last 90 days of conflict. The leading representatives of the South African legal team started by talking about the Nakba, talk about the destruction and chaos unleashed since 1948. And that already by itself weaves a historical narrative that can no longer be ignored. It is on record, and regardless of the outcome of this hearing, it will go down in history as a momentous moment in which Israel and its allies are being pushed to acknowledge, whether they like it or not, their acts of genocide. And adding to that, I would say that there is no turning back to a moment before October 7th.
So
Millions of people around the world are mobilized and are organized around the question of Palestine and its freedom. There is no turning back to that.
And how has the Biden administration reacted to the massive demonstration taking place throughout the country in support of the Palestinian people?
Well, I think it's important to recognize that initially the Biden administration was engaging in, I would say, undivided and sort of uncritical backing of the Israeli regime and the war in Gaza. And because of the growing number of demonstrations, the fact that there have been mobilizations of hundreds of thousands of people on the streets of Washington, of New York, of Los Angeles, and other cities around the country, and that there have been direct actions that interrupt Biden and his administration everywhere they go, they have had to, in a sense, begin to modulate and sort of have a two-version of their discourse, a two-wing talk, where on one hand, they say they must support Israel in its war to destroy Hamas accordingly. And at the same time, they now feel forced. They're forced by public opinion. They're forced by popular pressure to have to take into consideration some of the demands of the Palestinian people. Ultimately, it is not enough. And we know that more pressure is required for the big decisive factor, which would be the U.S. actually cutting all funding military and otherwise, to Israel.
Some members of Biden's cabinet have resigned precisely because of Washington's complicity in the massacre in Palestine. What effects do you think it may have in the context of the election year in which Biden will try to seek re-election?
Well, there haven't been any cabinet members, any ranking cabinet members that have resigned as a result of this war, but there has been clearly a huge level of contradiction and dissent within the White House, within the Biden administration. We hear clearly about Biden's own staffers who have written letters, who have demanded meetings, who have protested the White House itself, and that is a big important sign. I mean, overall, the Biden administration is facing a major political crisis never seen before. He has the lowest approval rating for a president at this time of the year, going back to Harry Truman in 1952. He is facing the strong possibility, as all polls indicate, that even in swing states that he won in the last election, like Michigan, he would lose by close to 12 points against a Trump candidate. And this is precisely because not just the Arab and Muslim community are saying they won't vote for Biden, but many more young voters across the country continue to identify Joe Biden as the president who supports genocide against the Palestinian people.
Thank you so much, Manolo, for your time hearing from the South. We were talking to Manolo de Los Santos, U.S.-based researcher and political activist, co-director of the People's Forum movement, in the context of the first hearing of South Africa's accusation against Israel of committing genocide.